to her to handle it her own way. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm happy to be here with you. Even though the topic may not be something that sounds joyous, I think it has a lot of value for us. And so I really wanted to be able to talk with you about some of the work that I'm doing. I particularly like working in this area because it has the possibility of amelioration and change. And so I've been doing research in the area of hostility and aggression in workplaces since the early 1990s. And now I've turned my attention to the professoriate. Probably because after all of these academic conference presentations, academics would come up and say, so have you started looking at the university? So I figured I better start doing that. Let me give you an overview of what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the quality of working relationships, what we understand about the significance of that, what is known about incivility and hostility, generally speaking, in the literature as it exists. Then I'm going to talk about the context of the academy. What is it about the academic environment that potentially fuels and supports these kinds of behaviors, but then also what potentially can be worked in the environment to challenge it. And then, in particular, I'd like to focus on colleague responding. I'm particularly interested in the role of bystanders and witnesses, because what we know is that people see this. The question is, what do they do? Why do they do what they do or don't do? And what are ways that we can help them be more efficacious? Because I really believe that the way we're going to manage some of the stuff that goes on is by enhancing our coworkers, the people with whom we live in the environment, and then helping us address the situation. And by all means, you got a question, stop me and we'll go through that. I'd like to talk a little bit about the kinds of connections or work relationships we have in organizations. Very broad distinction is the notion of high-quality connections. This comes from the work of Jane Dutton, who is a professor at the University of Michigan, Ross School of Business. And Jane talks about the qualities of high-quality connections in organizations. So they have features like respectful engagement, and there's a number of ways we talk about that in terms of our demeanor, our physical postures, how we engage, some basic communication type issues about how we communicate dignity and respect and caring for somebody else. Another element of it is what we call task enabling, which is in the relationships we have with people in the organizations. That involves how we teach, broadly defined, not just what we do in classrooms, but broadly defined, how we nurture other people, and how we advocate on the part of other people as well. So it's more about how we manage to get the work done and how we work with people in that process. The notion of trust becomes really critical in a work environment, and you probably all have experiences what happens when it's there and when it's not. And finally, what we know about high-quality connections is they tend to be energizers. They're supportive, they buffer, and they can protect. So how many of you have had experiences where you might be having a hard time and you're in your office or your department or wherever you are, and a particular colleague walks in that you just really feel very positive about? What's the impact on you when you see them? Does that affect how you feel? Do they, make your world seem at least manageable? So we can all, hopefully you've all had the experience about having people in your environment where you feel that way. That these are people that energize you. If you've got challenges, they're there to support you. They can potentially buffer you from stresses or issues going on in the organization. And in some cases, they can actually protect you. So then there's a variety of ways in which we protect. That's the upside of relationships. Then there is the other side of it, which is corrosive connections. In a nutshell, these are the ones that undermine, demean, dishearten, diminish. Any kind of D words you can think of. All right? And I often like to use Turkel's phrase here, these are the kinds of relationships that do violence to the spirit. So there may not be physical bruises, but there certainly is damage and harm and injury that is a result of them. And I suspect some of you have had experiences where that has in fact occurred. Okay, can you go for me? That's Jane's work. So when we talk about things like incivility and whatnot, we just need to talk about what those terms mean. And one of the terms that gets thrown around a lot is the notion of respect. So what is respect? And we can have lots of conversations about that. In fact, some of the intervention work that's done about developing respect in the workplace recognizes that it has a particular meaning in a particular context. So having said that, I'm going to go and give you a big, broad meaning, and we can figure that one out. Respect can be a due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. So you can see that manifesting itself or underlying a lot of the work that we do, a lot of our policies around diversity, for example, are about respect. Now, civility, what do we mean by civility? Now, it's become a very popular word to use. Jim Leach was here on campus with the Center for Citizenship a few months back, almost a year ago. That's right, it was over a year ago. Talked on his tour of the 50 states about civility. So there's a lot of big press about civility. There's a really cool book out now called Rude Democracy.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And talking about incivility and civility in civility in politics. It's really quite a wonderful book and looks at two cases, examples of politicians, one being Sarah Palin and the other being Barack Obama, and their use of incivility and civility respectively, and how they use that to develop relations. Dan?
I'm a little surprised by the definition of respect, because I would have thought that it would include valuing the work and the contributions of others.
Absolutely.
Even if they don't overlap what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's, and I think in some ways that fits under this is due regard, you respect, but you're right, there needs to be more in there in that piece. But it is a fun and fascinating thing to do in a unit, to talk about what respect means here, and what behaviors support that, and what behaviors contradict that. That's really important. And that's actually sometimes part of the intervention work that we do. So it's one of those things, incivility and bullying, it's one of those things you know it, and you see it or feel it. Now, one of my favorite quotes, I've often heard in different forms, is this one. People may not remember exactly what you did or what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Okay. And there's good neuropsychological reasons why that's true. Whoops, you okay? So I thought, I know that quote, but who said it? So I went looking. One has been attributed to Maya Angelou, so she's got a version of it. And I don't know if Maya is talking about somebody else. And then here's another version of it, Carl Bruckner. So it's something that's showing up in the atmosphere, but I think to me, personally, that has had meaning. And I saw it when I shared it with some of you, I could see some of your reactions around the table going, yeah, I can connect with that. What a respectful workplace looks like. I've done some work with the Veterans Affairs from 1999 to 2004. I was involved in a 5-year-long project with them and a number of other colleagues. And part of what we were looking at is civility in their organization. And these are some of the elements of some of the surveys we did with them that were closely connected to experiences of civility, productivity, and all those other good things. So this is an example of the kinds of questions that we saw or the responses people gave. So a respectful workplace is where people feel that people treat each other with respect, wherever that gets them. It could be a spirit of cooperation and teamwork. People that I work on can be relied on when I need them. Disputes are resolved fairly. People I work with take a personal interest in me. Imagine that. People you work with actually take a personal interest in you, which has been a challenge in organizations because we've done this sort of bifurcation about who I am as a professional and who I am as a personal, and never the twain shall meet, but we know that that's impossible, that those are very intimately connected. Differences among individuals are respected and valued. Managers or administrators or higher-ups, basically speaking, work well with employees of all different backgrounds. And this organization does not tolerate discrimination. So these were elements that showed up in the VA and that they regularly survey their organization by, and they actually use this as an indicator of impact and change, because they've been doing some work in their organization with their employees, with their management around more effective and respectful interaction. Another truism. I find this really very powerful, and so I'm just going to let you read it. Never underestimate the power, first of all, of your interaction with other people, and second of all, the power of the negative interaction. We know from research with kids that, and you might have seen it in some elementary schools where they'll have 3 to 1 or 5 to 1, 3 positive things to every negative thing. So they'll sometimes do with kids if the kids have been disrespectful. Sorry, I guess I shouldn't have moved too fast. If they've been disrespectful, the teachers stop them.